Hello, welcome to Our Humbled Hearts. I'm Beth Tiger, and joining me is my dear friend, Susan Merrick. We are two women who returned home to our Catholic faith after more than 2 decades immersed in the New Age movement. We invite you to join us as we boldly explore what it is to live a Christ-centered life in a post-Christian world. This will be a fun, messy, joy-filled journey as we allow Jesus to take the wheel.
Welcome to Our Humbled Hearts. We are here for our last episode today, Beth.
I cannot believe it.
I know. This is going to be kind of a heavy one. It's all about post-Christian world. And we've had many conversations, not just in the past couple of years, but I mean, it seems like it's been going on a long time.
It has been going on a long time. And I think when you and I were compelled to do a podcast, I mean, I don't think that this was the first thing on our minds. We both have written books and done other things. And when we were discussing what could we do for the Lord to share the good news, podcasting was not the number one thing. And for a while, I think both of us resisted it also. We both went, it's been nice to be living a quiet life, not be on social media. So there was a lot of questions about why we would do this, but this call to address the challenges of living in a post-Christian world that we both were facing, that we see our children facing, our communities, our country, our Western civilization. It just felt like this was the big thing. And since we were immersed in the polar opposite of Christian tradition and faith for many years, for me, I felt that this was the best way to address that and create another community to grow and to be supported in the post-Christian world that we do live in. And I think right away we should probably just talk about what is a post-Christian world, because it sounds, living a Christ-centered life in a post-Christian world sounds really great. But what does post-Christian mean? And what does it mean for you, Susan? And what does it mean literally? Because we've asked a lot of people, are we living in a post-Christian world? Is this really true? We even asked robots.
We did.
We did. But we've talked to priests about this and many other people. So it's not, this is not, and I did a ton of research, and I think people can do research for themselves. But I think that this is where we should start. What does it mean to be living in a post-Christian society and a post-Christian world?
Yeah, we need to start there for sure, because it was a really powerful thing for me when you said, when we were talking about the podcast and we were reluctantly going that direction, and we thought, well, what do we want to talk about, and how is that going to really show up in the world? And you said living a Christian or Christ-centered life in a post-Christian world. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. We had this knowing. Once we hit that, we knew, A, that we had to do it, and B, that was like a Holy Spirit moment right there. The living a Christ-centered life in a post-Christian world isn't just a catchy phrase for me. I really feel like it's a call to evangelize, to share our faith, to share my faith with people and my story with people. And that's when we sort of knew that, it was really nice to be quiet for a while, but now we know what we have to do, and God has called us to do it for as long as he wants us to do it for. But one of the things that came up for me as you were doing the introduction is post-Christian world doesn't mean that we feel like other religions have taken over. It's not like we're living in a post-Christian world because everybody is, whatever religion, pick a religion, doesn't matter. has nothing to do with that. It really has to do with the fact that, our country was founded on Christian principles, and we enjoy these liberties because of our founding fathers really believing that, first and foremost, we are one nation under God, and that we are people whose rights are given to us by God. And we've enjoyed all of the wonderful things that come with that, but we've gotten away from that. And that's what we mean, or at least what I mean, by post-Christian world.
Well, yeah, because in the 1950s and 60s, there was a trend for secularism, individualism. Many good things came out of that, this idea of healing the self, personal growth. But when that began to happen, there was a shift to reject the old ways. And a lot of that was based on, marriage, family, very conservative values were rejected in lieu of pursuit of self-pleasure, of choice, again, individualism. And that's why for me, when I thought about, when I was praying on what would we talk about, I considered what did I live like for most of my adult life. And that was a DIY spiritual person, a person yearning to connect with God, but thinking that I had the right to enjoy all of the benefits of a Christian moral worldview without actually having to be responsible to a Christian moral tradition. So this DIYing, picking and choosing, and it just sort of it was kind of really subtle, I think, how it took over, and it's very dark. So this is why this is a heavy topic, because individualism, choice for self, many of these things feel good and they are good, but when pendulums swing the one way or the other, we're out of balance. And now we're a culture that's numb. We're numb. We don't even recognize that we're being fed really dark things on a daily basis. We don't even think about it. We think, oh, well, that's okay. The pornography. When I was young, to see a woman in a bikini, in a magazine, that was like something. Now you see artists basically imitating sex acts with stuffed animals on stage, or performing pagan rituals on stage, or wearing next to nothing. And that's called being liberated. That's called being, free and independent. But what does that mean?
Yeah.
What is that reflecting? Or we see people dressed up as Satan putting blood in sneakers to sell this, like, to sell sneakers, like, and it's selling to children. We've just lost our way, but it was so subtle when it started, as it happened. And I think that's how the enemy works. The enemy works in a way where, it's like, look over here. I mean, what is the name of Lucifer but light? Like, you think, oh, it's I bring light to the world. It's light and it's loving and it's fabulous.
And it feels good.
And it feels good.
It's fun.
Yeah, until you have like the DIY hangover the next day. And I'm not talking about alcohol. I'm talking about just like, I don't feel satisfied. I don't feel satiated. It's those empty calories. But really, right now, we are living in a time where more people celebrate being agnostic or atheist. It's almost like there's this intellectual superiority. Like, if you're smart and you're intellectual, you couldn't possibly believe in God or creator because you're smarter than that, which for me is fascinating, because when I look at the world and I go, we know like this much. We also know our brains only like function, like a percentage. It's so arrogant, it's so self-focused. But we really are living in a post-Christian culture that celebrates not just choice and freedom, but there is a celebration of darkness now. I mean, we've seen movies go from kind of fantasy and fantastical and wonderful to really horrific and dark, just really like demonic and even the amount of exorcisms today, there's just, it's everything's on the rise because we're living in a culture that is sort of simmering in really not great things. And that's why for me and you, when we talked about doing this podcast, I felt really strongly that, yeah, for every act of shadow, we should be putting out, for every time somebody says, uh, Satan, I hate to use that word, enemy, we should be saying Jesus, 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 like let's counteract it with a community and a mindset that pivots and focuses on Christ. I mean, what are your thoughts? So you had talked about Disney too, like how Disney, I loved Disney and it was Cinderella and it was all these things, but maybe it wasn't.
Well, like everything, I think things start out with good intentions, and then people, you know, um, human beings. Uh, Disney has definitely, and it's not just Disney. Disney's on my mind because I saw something, and this is, I don't know, even maybe it was a couple of years ago, where Disney was involved in a project that was, I don't want to say celebrating, but it was introducing a character who was the Antichrist as like this kid, like I'm the Antichrist kind of thing. Now, full disclosure, I have not seen this because I don't want to see it. I just read things about it. But we see that in other TV shows too. It's almost like boiling the frog, where you start out with, oh, okay, well, it's just, I can't even think of a good example unless I go into like murder movies or horror movies. Horror movies are really interesting, and we could do a whole episode on horror movies, and maybe we will around Halloween. We could certainly do
Mhm.
something on that. But I feel like we have been anesthetized to evil. I feel like horror
Agreed.
movies, if you look at a horror movie when we grew up, like Freddy Krueger, it was a horror movie, and everyone, ooh, it's so scary, and you kind of get the adrenaline, right? You get this thrill. But now it feels like everybody's getting killed. It's like blood everywhere, and we're just sitting back eating the popcorn going, oh my gosh, this is so boring, people are just dying, can we just do do something else? I feel like I don't even know who the they is in this sentence, maybe it is the evil one, are trying to numb us to the horrors of the world so that they can create more horror, so that they can push us into this life that we probably wouldn't choose if we had really thought about it logically, or even emotionally or spiritually, probably is a better way to think of it. And Disney also, just because I was kind of horrified when I saw this, they were creating card decks, like tarot cards, with Disney characters on them. I think they may have created more than one deck, but the one that I saw was for the, oh my gosh, what's the name of it? Disney villains. There we go. Disney villains. Makes sense for a card deck,
Right.
I guess. But isn't that interesting? Because a lot of the card decks I used were all love and light, but now they're right there in the open. Disney villains. Let's do cards, people. Let's pull some
Well,
cards.
well, because you
It's
said it
horrific.
perfectly, Susan. You said actually something that's really cuts to the, to the right to the point is we've become anesthetized to evil. It's not enough that we became anesthetized to sex scenes between couples. Now it's extra. There's killing in a movie. Now there's, like you said, it's a bloodbath everywhere. Look at the games. Look at the video games that children are playing. We were playing Pac-Man when we were kids, and now, they're going and, they're doing, like a virtual game where they're killing people, and then we wonder why kids are so confused. And, when you think about even all of these shootings and what have you, if it feels not real, if you can do it in the safety of your own home, what's the big deal if you do it out in the real world? Because it's almost like there's no reality. It's like we're kind of living in this false reality. And I think it was subtle and it was over time. And it's because we really stepped away from living under under the mantle of Christ. In God we trust. This idea that it is me that I trust. It is science that I trust. It is technology that I trust. All of those things are beautiful tools that come through human beings, but it actually is to the detriment of our souls. It's also why I think so many people are dissatisfied, have anxiety, they're so depressed. I mean, we live in a culture where we have so much. When I was working with the nonprofit, we went down to Guatemala and we were working with victims who had been trafficked. And there were little girls and they were talking to my daughter. And my daughter asked her, like, what would you love to do? And she said, I would love to go to school. And the other girl said, I would love to fly on a plane. Oh. And my daughter said, I just looked at them and I thought, I'm doing all of that, never even thought that it's anything really. Yeah. And these little ones were thrilled with little white kids that we gave them. There's just a level of dissatisfaction because I do think there's a focus outside of ourselves on our material success, on how we look. I mean, look at the obsession with beauty and material possessions. I'm not saying we shouldn't care for ourselves, we shouldn't have a desire to have things, but they are the tools to live well. But to live truly well, we have to connect with God. We have to put God in the forefront. And I think that's the missing piece. But Father Chris said something to us last week when we were interviewing him that I thought was just so hopeful.
Yeah, I know. It's like, thank you. Bring us hope, Father Chris.
Right. If our listeners haven't listened to the Ask Father Chris episode, I highly encourage you to, because he's so wise and it was great to talk to somebody like him. But, we did ask him, are we living in a post-Christian world? And he said, yeah. And the church was founded in a post-Christian time. And I went, wow.
Or a pre-Christian.
Pre-Christian.
Like totally pagan, like
right.
Crazy, like worship of Baal and the pantheon of gods in Rome, and it just
But we haven't come that far.
Christian.
We haven't come that far. We still do child sacrifice. We just call it something else.
Right. I know.
Abortion. So anyway, but I'm just saying, like, we haven't come that far. We haven't learned that much, but at least we know how the story ends, right? We know there's the resurrection and we have the Eucharist. So he just said, look at when you are focused on Christ and you're focused on the community within that context, Christ-centered. Don't worry, you're going to be okay. But there's a dedication and a commitment to creating community where you're safe to explore that, where you can talk about the struggles. I think about my children and my grandchildren and my future grandchildren and the challenges that they're all facing right now, living in a world like this that feels very uncertain, that also feels that there's a lack of community centered on spirituality. Those are challenges. And so I'm looking forward to discussing more about, all of those things, what it's like to be a woman in post-Christian time, what it's like to be in a relationship, to create a beautiful home that feels Christ-centered. But we have to acknowledge that that's where we are right now in our culture.
What we're living in. Yeah, I mean, we've definitely taken God out of the mix. He is not in the majority of people's thoughts. Our challenge has always been, putting God at the forefront, whether we knew it or not, right? Either we're seeking, like, why isn't this working for me? I can't figure it out. Well, because you're not putting God in the middle there. You're not eyes on God kind of thing. And now it's, the daily challenge of, I blow it all the time, And I'm still like trying to be conscious of putting God in the forefront. But I just think, this post-Christian world, we've taken God out of that mix, and we've taken his teachings. I was reading the Beatitudes this morning. I mean, the most important speech or teaching that he gave, the Beatitudes and everything else that that followed along with it. And that's really putting God at the forefront, and it's hard. It is really hard. But I think about Esther too. She was coming to mind when we were talking about doing this episode, and so I had to get my Bible out, and I'm going to read from my Bible.
Yes, you should.
The,
And
she was
Esther
not
was
in
a
the post-Christian
queen.
world, but she was.
Yeah, no, she was a
Yes,
queen in the Old Testament.
right, and she was facing the challenges of being a Jew in a pagan environment. So it's Esther 4:14. I'm just going to skip some of it here, but. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And I love that reminder, because that kind of speaks to why we're doing this podcast. I think that it's no accident that we're doing this now in this time. And I've seen variations on the whole Esther passage, but maybe we were born for such a time as this. And not just about the podcast, but in general, like all of us, all of our listeners, all of our viewers, we have been put on this earth at this time. What were we born for? And I think that's one of the
Right.
things that we will also tackle next season. We're going to be talking about discernment, I think, and what
And
are we
claiming our
doing for
birthright
God?
as beloved
Yeah,
children of God. And it's so incredible to consider, but the challenges are real, because every day, if we go on to social media, what the algorithm is feeding us, it can
right.
really lead us, far to the left or to the right, and it can become so confusing. And so it's so easy also to become distracted and
Yep.
out of your center and out of touch with your heart, your soul, and that line to Jesus, to our creator. And that's why I think for people, they should just even start with using simple tools like the Hello app, seeking out more podcasts and things like Bible in a Year or Catechism in a Year by Ascension with Father Mike Schmitz. If you have this hunger right now with technology, we can use it for good too. There are so many
Absolutely.
incredible ways to continue being fed and be in a community and choosing to put God first. It doesn't mean that it's not challenging, but you were born for such a time as this, because I don't think God gives you anything that you can't handle as long as you allow him to carry that cross with you.
Yeah. Oh, so beautifully said. So beautifully said. Father Chris, when he was talking about the post-Christian world, and that that the church was founded in this pagan environment, that kind of blew my mind. And that goes back to the, being born for such a time as this. But it's really interesting that we've had an opportunity to talk to a priest. Actually, we've talked to two priests. That's a little secret that we haven't
I know.
revealed yet. We have a bonus round this summer. So please subscribe to the podcast so you will know when that drops. But we've had two Father Chris's, Monsignor Chris and Father Chris, and we're going to have Father Chris back and Monsignor Chris back next season. I won't spoil all the surprises, because Monsignor Chris is going to be doing something else, and I won't tell on that one. But Father Chris will be back to answer more questions. So how did you come across two Father Chris's, by the way? Because you procured
I
our Chris's.
I guess the Holy Spirit. 'Cause It all started with confession.
Mm. That thing that we
So,
weren't going to do, you mean?
yeah, exactly. So when you went to the church, in Sedona, and you had your moment when you returned to the church, and I was up at the lake, and I started going to mass at the small country church up there, and I was really drawn in by the priest who said mass. He was very personable, very engaging, and I was just struck by the amount of young families that were in the church, especially because it's a small church. The kids would skip up the aisle and he would bless them. And so when I started considering, okay, I'm going to return, but I want to do a full confession, I thought I need more than 5 minutes. So I had to make an appointment. But I thought this is the guy because I just felt very safe for some reason with him. And actually, before I even went to confession, I would go up to receive and he would say my name. Like he actually got to know us. And so, I did my very first uh, born again Catholic confession with Father Chris. And what I really
Oh,
appreciated about that was he took a lot of time to talk about why we're led astray and why we make the mistakes we make. So I didn't walk out of there feeling filled with shame. I walked out of there thinking, wow, that was so meaningful to have some spiritual direction on how best not to blow it. And then I
yeah.
proceeded to blow it again and again. And I'm down in South Carolina and I hear this other priest saying mass, and he's really intellectually interesting and smart, but very engaging. And he was from Jersey. And I loved that he was from Jersey down in South Carolina. I did not specifically seek out Monsignor Chris for that. I just happened to be waiting in line to go to confession again. This is a year or so later, and I walk in, and there's Monsignor Chris. And like Father Chris, he just was that person that was so wise too, knew so much about the Bible, has been a priest for over, I think, 45 years, was an
Yeah.
educator. And something that he said to me at the end of my confession, because here I am waiting for my penance. Everyone, that's what people think, right, about confession. They're like, okay,
Gonna get in
what's it
trouble.
going to be? And so after our conversation and really talking through some of the challenges, he said to me, I want you to go outside and I want you to walk up to the front of the church and I want you to sit in front of the tabernacle and look at the crucifix and say thank you. And I was actually brought to tears because I thought, he said, just sit there for a little bit and think he did that for you. He did that for all of us. And he just wants us to be with him, in relationship. And so I sought him for spiritual direction too. And when we were getting ready to do this podcast, and of course, you know me, Susan, I'll ask anybody. And I had already asked Father Chris if he would be a regular on our podcast. And I knew I wanted Monsignor Chris's wisdom as well. And he said yes too. And the gift of that is community, creating
Yeah.
community, and also having um, people who are learned, to having priests that can guide and direct us. And that's why in our being born, why we return to the Catholic faith, for me, it wouldn't be enough to be doing this alone. I'm so glad to be home uh, in the church and to have some great anchors for not only myself, for you, and for our listeners in
Yeah.
both of them, because they are truly gifts and they're giving their time. Well, maybe for a sandwich. But
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
they're just
They were
wonderful.
wonderful to have on, and I'm really excited to talk to them again for next
Yeah,
season.
yeah, me
So
too.
I don't even want to say goodbye. I feel it's time to wrap it up. The end of season one.
I know, but
Oh
we have
my
so many
goodness.
wonderful things in store for our listeners and for our community, because that's what we're hoping to build here. We feel like we laid some groundwork in this first season, but next season we have so many wonderful nuggets of wisdom and goodness and community. So I do hope people subscribe and follow us on, Instagram, YouTube, Apple. We'll be in touch throughout the summer season, and we do have that special episode with Monsignor Chris for our 4th of July, our 250th
That's right.
anniversary of the great United States.
Yes, it was a great conversation. So tune in July 4th for that one. So, all right. Well, thanks to everybody who has followed us on our season 1 journey. We are so blessed to have you with us. And until next season.
God bless you all. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions, wish to share a faith story, or just want to ask for a specific prayer request, please DM us on Instagram or Facebook. May God go before you, Christ walk beside you. May the Holy Spirit fill you, and your angels protect you. Until next time, God bless.